Oh, it's August. This episode's going up in August.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. It's also, well, it's because in the notes, I have that we're going to talk about how hot it's been in LA and also in other places. Like, geez, it's been so hot in New York.
It's insanely hot, yeah.
But
I think it'll
it's so
still be
weird that
hot in August.
Oh, no, I believe it. But it's so weird that the first time we're talking about how hot it is in August as opposed to July or even June. It like just got hot out of nowhere, like last week.
Insanely hot.
I'm trying to think about, is there anything else that we want to talk about with hot weather?
Well, no, I think it's just like insanely hot where I'm someone who likes to wear sweaters all the time, even in like 90-degree weather. And I have like sweaters specifically to wear during 90-degree weather where it's just not as thick. I know it's insanely hot because I can't wear those sweaters during the summertime. And I'm sweating profusely on it. I don't know if you've noticed on our morning calls where I kind of want to dip out a little early because I want to go change out of my sweater because I realize how hot it's getting.
You could just not wear a sweater. What about like a long sleeve or like something that's like a baseball tee? Kind of like, what is it about sweaters specifically?
Because it makes me feel so cozy and as if I'm still in bed. And that's why I really like wearing sweaters.
All right. Yeah, I'm always in like a t-shirt and shorts. So I'm always actually right now I have a blanket at my feet because I'm like the air conditioning's a little cold, so I just want something for my toes.
No, I love being in a sweater. I bought an Udi because I love being in sweaters that much, which is like those, blanket sweaters essentially. Yeah.
Isn't it just a big poncho made out of a blanket?
Yeah. That's exactly. I love wearing that. It's my favorite.
I think it's been a little bit since we've talked about like how Studio DBJ has been doing. Probably since May, since our break episode. It's been going pretty well. We're making like a lot of big pivots for the second half of the year. So it's exciting, but also a little stressful, a little scary.
Yeah. No, I think I was telling you how our new financial goal, I think is the first time I've been like, ooh, because our initial goal definitely was like, oh, we could do it. And then this new one, I was like, I'm a little scared. I'm excited, but I'm also like a little scared because I was like, this sounds like a lot harder than the first goal where we're like, oh, we just have to quote for like longer term projects or like bigger projects or something like that. We're like, okay, we got that. This one is definitely like, I think has to be more strategic. That's the scary part for me.
And then Gina and I both have had like a renewed interest in our social media platforms. So trying to make sure that we are actually posting stuff and actually engaging with people. Yeah. So we've started a TikTok. We haven't, as of right now, when we're recording this, put up anything yet. But if you wanted to look for it, it's Studio DBJ on TikTok. For this episode, because of the hot weather, because we are stressed out low-key, and because the last episode was kind of more intense, talking about like loving your job and what it means to like be employed and all that stuff, we wanted to kind of keep this one a little bit lighter. So today we're going to be talking about what we think is overrated and underrated in design. I'm Calvin.
And I'm Jean.
And this is 27, a podcast about growing up. I guess you should start it because I'm going to talk first about Spec Work.
Yeah, I'll be like, so Calvin, what do you think?
Oh, wait, sorry. I forgot. Let me lay down the
rules.
The rules are so easy, but it's just, like you all have seen. I forget what YouTube channel does it. They like get celebrities or musicians to like talk about what they think is overrated and underrated. But pretty much we're just going to talk about a bunch of things related to design, whether it's actually like industry stuff or just stereotypes and things about the typical designer, quote unquote, and talking about whether we think that they are overrated, meaning that they have too much, they take up too much space and for no reason, or they're underrated, meaning that they deserve more attention and deserve to be respected more than they are currently.
So Calvin, our first topic is spec work. How do you feel about that?
So I guess as a definition for people, spec work is getting asked to do work for free it's like speculative work so that you can tell whether somebody has the skills to do something. I think spec work is overrated. I don't think it's overrated in that people like it too much, but I think it's overrated as in I don't like it at all. And I think it's bad, like overrated. People ask for spec work a lot, and I think that it's pretty difficult to especially when you're in the process of applying for jobs, to have somebody ask you to do a specific task and then asking you to take additional time in addition to interviews, resumes, cover letter, a portfolio presentation, all of that, to also like spend an hour, maybe half of a day doing spec work design so that they can verify you as opposed to taking your portfolio at its word. So I think spec work is not my favorite thing. Yeah, and I tend to just place more, like if I'm gonna be reviewing somebody as a designer, I would rather look specifically at what they do and what they present and ask them, as opposed to like making them do homework.
I would say that it's underrated, but actually really depending on the situation, but primarily I think it's underrated in that one, it's kind of like the scapegoat everyone uses to shit on things sometimes, especially.
Yeah, this is a surprising development for me because Jean, maybe like 3 years ago, had gone on big tirades to me about spec work being bad. So this is a new development.
Yeah. And now I think it's kind of like a two-way relationship. Like you don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. But if you want to do it, pick the ones you are game for, because I realized that for Studio DBJ, our start was definitely spec work in terms of like I would find people that I liked or that I wanted to work with and like put together something real quick to be like, hey, I got the portfolio to do all the work, but like I understand you. So you should work with me because I understand you, which is ultimately spec work. And in some ways, like you can do spec work for yourself. You don't have to do it for other clients or other companies, because the only way to get projects that you want to get hired for are showing the projects that you actually want to do. I think if you kind of think about it like, oh, these are your personal passion projects that you actually do want to use them for, that's totally a-okay. And especially if you have to do spec work for a company and you're like, okay, I really want to work for so-and-so, part of the interview process is spec work. Just ask them like, okay, if I do spec work, can we have something that says I can show this in my portfolio then, right? That it's not going to be undercover or hidden. And I think there's like this weird line of people thinking that if you do spec work, they're going to steal your idea. Someone told me something which is really funny, which is like, you're not that special, you know? And it was like, okay, your ideas are not always going to be taken, but which is why if you do have to do spec work, it's a two-way relationship, and just ask for a contract on like, you know, I'm the artist, I do get to also have ownership over this and all that good stuff.
I think the difference in the way that we see it is just like it's a matter of control about who has the control. When you send out, I wouldn't even call it spec work to a client. I would say it's more like complimentary early concepts to a client. When you do that, it's you hold all the power because it's, you know, you did it out of your own volition and you have the rights to it. But I always feel, like you said, it's iffy when a employer asks you to do it and when it's not like very clear who has any ownership of what. So
I was like, actually, and also when you send out your spec work to be reviewed, when you export your PDF InDesign or I think in any PDF program, you can put a password on that shit. So like if you're really protective of it and you send out spec work, you can put a specific password for only folks to see it, you know? And I think you'd also limit who gets access to it. So there's definitely ways to protect your spec work, but you just gotta, it's like, again, a two-way relationship. You just gotta know what you gotta do.
I've heard it asked before that if you want, sort of like what you were saying, where you can negotiate a contract. I've heard advice online saying that you can also either tell people that you will be billing for the spec work that you're doing or just send an invoice afterwards. Sending an invoice without letting them know is pretty shady, but I think it's something that you can bring up if it is something that is really important to you. If you don't really care about whoever you're applying to and you're like, you know what, if I don't get this, at least I got paid for it. You can, ask them if they would be able to pay you for the work that you're doing.
And I think even the way to phrase that, instead of saying like, oh, I will be billing for it, just be like, oh, so what's your budget that I should keep in mind for spec work? And then that's when they're like, oh, instead of like, I will be invoicing you, just move forward with the idea that you will be getting paid. So just ask what the budget is instead of like, is it okay that I invoice you?
The same vein, talking about Fiverr. So spec work is the idea of doing work for free for a client who's asking to test your skills or, something else. Fiverr is an online service where you can list your skills for sale. I think it has a bit of a bad rap with the design community because of both international and then also undervalued design for like doing logos or doing website designs. a lot of people will list logos on Fiverr for like less than $100 or websites for less than $300. So it can kind of be difficult to compete as a designer. I guess that's kind of the reasons why I would kind of consider Fiverr overrated. Again, not overrated because it's good, but overrated because it is not great to the design community in that way. But I know Jean has a different opinion about this now.
Yeah, it's totally changed from where I first started again, which I think Fiverr's underrated. It's a really good starting ground, I think, for people and just trying to get their feet wet in somewhat of a protective way. And it's a good way to meet folks in their international community, because like it's not just for clients to reach out to designers. Like you can also reach out to other folks in Fiverr to get to know them more, and especially their services and how they run their business and everything. And it's like you're not supposed to make all your money on Fiverr. It's a really great starting ground for you to just go with. And it's a really great place for especially clients who don't have a big budget, because I think most of the time designers forget that clients don't know this world, and it's like a very safe space for them to go in with I actually don't know how much this is supposed to cost, so I might have $1,000 or I might have $35, but I want to understand how to do something. And most of the time they might either, go with something first that they kind of love, and then they're ready to graduate to a different designer outside of Fiverr when they understand how to do it more, or you can like get them to trust you and then work your way in a relationship that will get them to pay you more, so I think that's why Fiverr's underrated. And a lot of people just kind of shit on it now, and I was like, oh, that's so sad, because then that's a whole community that we're shitting on.
I will say, I think that this is the first like strong disagree that I'm gonna have with you.
Oh, go for it.
I think that it's still Fiverr's really tough because I think it still leads people to undervalue things. There's two ways that it goes, which is either you get something, you go for Fiverr and then you get something good, and then you're like, oh, good design is cheap.
Yeah.
And then there's the other way, which is you go to Fiverr and then you pay not a lot, and then you get something bad, and then you're like, oh well, why should I even spend all this money if sometimes it's going to turn out bad. I think that what the trap of Fiverr is, in my opinion, is it is a transactional approach to design. I think a lot of people today see design as very collaborative and see design as something that, especially with like the rise of design thinking in schools, that there's this trend towards design is supposed to solve a problem.
Yeah.
The way that Fiverr approaches it, I feel like it's not conducive to like a thoughtful design process. I don't know. I think it's just kind of rough.
I think we're very lucky that the clients that we work with want a collaborative approach. And I think in a certain way, the level of design we get to do is very highbrow in the general world, right? Where there are these very fun brand identities, where there are these fun implementations of things, and like our clients want to talk to us. And then in like the bigger real world, out of California, out of the LA circle, like design is a service for a lot of people. Not everyone will be able to get to that level of highbrow design. So that's why I think like Fiverr is a good starting ground for someone to eventually get to highbrow. But I also feel you on the whole, like it does undermine valuing design, because some people feel that they have to compete with folks in a different country where their currency is so different, right? And they're like, okay, I can charge $5 for design because that's in my country. That's a completely different rate. That could be my whole week,
My main worry is that I know that there are two markets. There's like the transactional market, and then there's the boutique, I guess, boutique design market. But as like the prices of Fiverr become too competitive, it like moves people away from being in a boutique market and just saying like, well, I can just do this instead. Because there are like, obviously there's, people in California, like big startups who are very definitely just going to go for boutique design. There are people who are obviously like, doing their small restaurant, so they're just going to go to Fiverr. But then there are all those people in the middle. And I think the more appealing Fiverr looks from a price and from a like ease of
like from a competitive market standpoint.
it kind of like shifts more people towards that like undervaluing design camp, as opposed to like making it more of this balance where you have both that can live more equally with each other. Especially for people who are like in the middle, like you said, like if somebody has $35 for a budget, like they're gonna go to Fiverr. But if somebody has $1,000 for a budget, they could go to like a small design studio or like a freelancer. But they also have like this pull of like, well, if I spend $70 on a logo, then I have all that money to do other stuff. So I would rather do that. And then you kind of push those middle people more towards the Fiverr camp.
I see that.
So that was kind of heavy. This next one is going to be very light. So there's like this stereotype that designers wear all black, or like artists wear all black. Do you think that's overrated or underrated?
I think it's underrated now. Because we're both victims to wearing all black now, and it's so
the way that we're both wearing all black right now.
Yeah, including the hat and everything and our headphones. Oh my god. We get made fun of it so much, but actually there are a lot of benefits to it. One, definitely comfortable, easy to pick your outfit each day. And then what I heard from a hairdresser was like, the reason why they wear dark clothes or black clothes is because when you're getting your hair cut and you're looking in the mirror, they serve as a really great background for you to be able to actually look at your hair. And I was like, wait, that's actually a very kind of great mirror effect of design, where when you're presenting work, at least if you're wearing all black, less focus is on you and more focus is on the work. And so the more you make yourself invisible by just wearing all black, the better it is for your work, because that's kind of what is standing out.
And I guess not even from a design perspective, but from a style perspective. Not that black is more stylish, but there is this trend towards internet fashion and like Instagram fashion that is very outfit based and very like almost like costume, where you have like, this is the entire look. I think that's number one, detrimental to the environment, fast fashion, production and all that stuff, sustainability. But there's also a style component where like you can't wear that like tie-dye orange tank crop top with anything else besides the matching set. It can be really nice to have not even all black, but just like a more like pared back style, because then you get to have opportunities to wear individual things that can make things pop, like an accessory or like if you want to wear a Gucci belt, it's like that's gonna stand out a lot more when you wear all black than it is when you wear a Gucci tracksuit with a Gucci belt. It's like
it's a lot. Also, since I have been getting more adorned with ink, it's just so much easier to wear all black, because then I have so much color on my arm already. I was like, just wear an all black outfit.
And then there's also, in addition to accessories, there's other ways to like have an interesting outfit. Wearing all black doesn't mean that you're just wearing black slacks and a black t-shirt. Like you can vary up your silhouette or like patterns or textures or whatever. Like there's other stuff that you can do. So I think that it's underrated, because I think people imagine it as you wear the turtleneck and the and the black jeans, and as opposed to like tech wear can be all black and goths technically wear all black. Like there's a lot of personality that you can have wearing all black too.
Okay, so we come across a struggle of like how to quote our projects and how to like tell clients what we're worth. How do you feel about the phrase value-based pricing?
Value-based pricing, at least to me, sounds like we're talking about saying, I cost this much because I am worth this much. Like my work is valued at this much because it does this. I think there are people who have a leg to stand on when they do it. But I think when it comes to like younger designers, I think it's wildly overrated.
I agree with you there. Yeah.
To like not mince words, I don't think a lot of young designers have the ability to say what they're worth because they don't have enough backing. They don't, like I said, they don't have a leg to stand on in terms of that.
It links your worth to an actual financial value, which is just unreasonable and unhealthy. In some ways, it inflates your ego, especially if you believe you're like a really great designer and you're like, I should charge $150 or $500 per hour. And you're like, well, in industry standard, 150 to 250 is like at a high-end boutique already. So if you're starting out with, I'm going to charge this much, it's kind of like, you don't have a real sense of reality of where you're at. And what I'd like to say more is like getting paid your cost of operation, and actually breaking it down to how much does it cost to operate your business? Because I think that kind of determines how you can start out.
Let me ask you this. How long do you think somebody needs to be at that like meeting costs, that like bottom line, before they can start to quote their quote unquote worth?
I think when you start to understand the liability of the pricing, you're able to charge your quote unquote what you believe you're worth. Because when you offer a client a $5,000 service or like a $10,000 service or a $500 service, in somewhat way, I think the responsibility is that you're saying you're liable for $500, like an initial $500 of growth in business or $5,000 of growth in business, just as you are responsible for them losing that amount, which is why it's important to have in your contract that you are not liable for their increase or decrease of business, which is also why you should get business insurance to protect you from that too. But it, like, when you start to understand, like, okay, I'm promising you $5,000 of value in your business, and I understand what that means, you could start charging your worth.
Yeah, to go even further with that, it's not just that your value as a designer comes from your creativity and your technical skill. That is part of it. But there is a lot of value that comes from understanding how people work. And that comes from experience. It also comes from like talking to people and like being in a business setting for a while, because they don't just want you to do something creative and fun. They want you to do something that fits their industry and fits their audience. And all that stuff doesn't come from design school. It comes from working with, working with clients.
Yeah. The other segue to getting paid your worth, value-based pricing. I see the new phrasing right now in the design industry is like, are you ready to invest in your business? And I was like, oh, that's a heavy phrasing there. I'm like, do you really understand what it means to ask for a client to invest in your service? Because that means you are promising a return of investment.
And like both of us said, this is not like, if you've been in the game for 30 years, like, this is not for you. Like, you know what your value is worth and you know what you bring to a team and stuff.
The next one, I was like, Calvin, are you team iPhone or not? What are you?
So I do have an iPhone, and I've had an iPhone. It was my first smartphone. I can't even say it's my first phone because we're old enough. We're old enough that we had other phones before we had iPhones. I think that iPhones are neither over nor underrated. I think they're kind of where they need to be. I think they get a lot of hate because it's fun to hate on Apple for a lot of people. Also because iPhones are a little slow to like on the pickup for different features and stuff. But I don't know. There's something about like the user experience of having an ecosystem. Like, it sounds monopolistic from when you like look at it as a person not in the ecosystem. But like, I don't know why you wouldn't want your devices to coordinate with each other. And logistically, you just can't do that unless you're all under the same umbrella. And I think that's cool. And it's a design solution and people don't agree with it, and that's fine. But I think it has its place. So I think it's rated, not over, not under. It's just rated.
I was looking at your notes and it said rated, and I was like, how is he gonna tie that in?
Yeah.
Rated.
Well, because we haven't talked about it so far, but other ones we say it's both over and under, because I think there's like two avenues to it. But I think for iPhones, it's just like, it's just right where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think it's overrated because I was never really team iPhone. I was team BlackBerry. I forgot what happened. You know, actually, what I was team Razor. Do you remember that? Crazer. I had the skinny one. But I think iPhones are overrated because they consistently make problems that don't exist sometimes and then solve them and then make you pay for them again, which is, it's so annoying. Like, because I think I do a very good job on taking care of my phone, and I'll be able to keep my phone for many years. And then out of nowhere, the phone just stops working because the phone no longer, like the actual phone can't operate with the new iOS. And it's like, well, this wasn't my problem. This was your problem. You made me have this problem, so you need to be responsible for it. And you need to get me a new phone. I think Apple needs to have that into their insurance policy or something into that, like, okay, if we didn't cause the problem, like, you're allowed to get a new phone, because it's ridiculous that I have to spend over $1,000 to get a new phone for taking care of my phone. And then I didn't do anything wrong. That's why I think it's so overrated.
But You did get something. You got an extra 2 or 3 years out of your phone. Like you,
You know.
you got something out of. You'd have to spend $1,000 earlier.
I was like,
So
but I'm like, if there, I could have kept my phone for so much longer and continued using it if they didn't consistently like update the phone so that like I couldn't use the software.
that is not. I will defending Apple. That is not Apple's problem. That's tech culture's problem. So like. If you would have the same problem if you were with Samsung. Like
so.
It's not that.
Well, I don't have a Samsung phone to pinpoint the problem to. I have an iPhone to pinpoint.
Letting the audience know for transparency that Jean, before she had her iPhone 10 that she has right now, 10s.
All right, 10. I don't know. I have this one. Is it 11 now?
Oh, you have the 12 then.
12. Okay.
But no, 11 Pro. But you had
an X for the longest time, and then the iPhone 5 for the longest time.
There you go. Yeah. So that's what she's talking about. She had a 5 from which came out in like 20.
I had a 5S.
2014, 2015.
I think so. Yeah.
And then had it until 2019.
Yeah.
So that's 5 years.
Yeah.
That's twice as long as most people have their phones. So that's what you gain.
Yeah.
You didn't have to spend $1,000 in the middle. So we've been talking about it in increasing amount as the podcast goes on. So TikTok, overrated, underrated.
It's totally underrated now.
100%. I like cringe at the days where I was a TikTok denier. I stand by being a Musical.ly denier because Musical.ly was like the predecessor to TikTok. Mm-hmm. I will stand by that. Mm-hmm. But TikTok, I was wrong.
Yeah, me too.
About her.
Totally. Yeah, she's wonderful. I like have started editing a few videos in TikTok. I'm like, wait, this is really fun. It's kind of frustrating to try to get things to time perfectly because my fingers can only touch so much on the screen, before it's exact. But I think it's totally fun.
The only thing is, I think there's going to be a reckoning at some point. I don't know when it's going to happen because TikTok, similar to YouTube, is like so democratized of a platform, but it will not be like ever considered a full democracy because of the algorithm. And I wonder when the big TikTok algorithm discourse is going to happen because it hasn't really happened yet. People are like, oh, I'm on this side of TikTok. I'm on this side of TikTok. But nobody's really talking about algorithms yet. And I think that that's going to be a big conversation later. Yeah. But I think that like as a platform, it's so I wouldn't say welcoming because I think there is a lot of negativity on TikTok, but I think that it's very accessible. It's very easy to use, and I don't know. I think it's just like a great place to like connect.
And it's a great place to just like I don't know, like to just like know what's going on around in the world and people's lives, and like to quickly learn things or quickly like just get an idea, which I think is really fun. I think it's the best way to feel inspired because you're just consistently scrolling through so many things versus like having to look for inspiration. It's very activating is the best way to say it.
Jean and I are at a weird intergenerational split where half of the people our age and like in our circles do not know anything about TikTok and do not engage with TikTok in any sense. And then half of our cohort love it. It's always weird to me when I'm like, oh, I saw this TikTok to a friend and they're like, oh, you're on TikTok? Like, wait, like, why aren't you? And why are you saying it like that?
It's like, because I think
it's a weird moment.
We had like a conversation where I realized like we're both millennial, but you lean towards Gen Z and millennial, and I'm leaning towards boomer and millennial, which makes me so sad sometimes. I'm like,
well, there's a whole generation between your Gen X.
Yeah, there you go.
The one between.
Yeah, and then I'm just kind of like, I want to relate. So I'm like, I want to, swing on this way. And I feel like some of the things on my TikTok are very like millennial, where I was thinking, you know what, Gen Zers don't care the fact that we have side bangs or part our hair in the middle, or like the fact that we wear skinny jeans. I was like, only millennials care about that. I was like, oh God, I can't believe I ever made a big deal about that.
I do wear baggy pants now though, because I looked at myself in skinny jeans and was like, you know what? It's time. I'm like, we've been having a couple fun topics of TikTok and iPhones and wearing all black. But the biggest one actually is, how do you feel about being an art director?
since a lot of folks, I think when they come to us, especially when they interview with us, they aspire to be an art director, and I was definitely in that camp.
The disclaimer is that I was in engineering, so I'm not like super plugged into design like firsthand, but I feel like maybe 7 years ago, people were very like, I want to be a senior designer, and then now everybody's like, I want to be an art director. And part of me feels like it's just like good marketing. Like art director sounds cool. It sounds much better than senior designer. But I think art direction is overrated unless it's what you like. You know what I mean?
No, I feel you on that.
Because some people really like the technical process of designing, and some people don't. And if you don't like the technical process of designing, then maybe like being an art director, creative director, marketing director, that's like kind of your thing. But if you like drawing, you don't want to be an art director.
I think being an art director is definitely overrated. And I think it's because like when you graduate, you don't really know what positions there are in design unless your teacher, guidance counselor, or someone has really directed you down. These are the open positions in design. But I think also because design doesn't know what the open positions are. Like, I don't think there's anything like really like hot shot about being an art director anymore. I think it used to be, but now a lot of art direction gets categorized as like Pinterest mood boards. Art direction is definitely a lot more than just the art direction part, and there's a whole part of management that you talked about and like the actual directing part that you talked about. And I was like, it's not as fun. I think being like a senior designer is pretty badass, or like even a senior production artist, that's like majorly badass because you get the final thing out and looking fire and looking great, and you're the one who like actually makes the magic happen, you know. And I think a lot of people should definitely aspire for those positions, especially if you're like really great at Illustrator programs, or if you're really great at like getting things to be exactly precise. You don't have to be the creator. You can be the executioner, and that would be amazing. Wrong word. I just saw you laugh. I was like, wrong word.
The executioner, everybody.
That's the new. Actually, that should just be someone's.
I think it'd be executor.
Yeah,
but I'm not 100%
I
sure.
think, but either way, I don't mean like going on the guillotine, you know. But that should definitely be someone's title. I think if someone applied to me with the job title like executioner or executor, sorry, I would definitely be like design executor. Okay. That should be our next job posting is design executioner. But like you said, art director has the best marketing. So, you know,
because like you direct the art, like
yeah.
Same with creative director. I think those two, they get conflated a lot too, I think, but they sound so much cooler than the other ones.
Yeah. I remember when we were picking our titles, and I really didn't want to say art director, and I really didn't want to say creative director, and that's why it took me so long to make a business card, because I was like, oh god, I don't want to put art director on my business card. And like when I graduated school, I definitely was like, oh, I want to go down the art director route. And then I learned what it was, and I was like, oh, I don't want to go down the art director route. I was like, this doesn't sound fun.
Art director also isn't really even a final, it's not like the last level of design anymore, because you can be an associate level art director. Like you don't have to be, like art directors are not like the top.
So one of, I think, the strongest art directions out there in the world is inspired by Barbara Kruger. Like, how do you feel about Barbara Kruger?
So my main touch point with Barbara Kruger is her most like seminal work, I guess. It's the Crown one, it's the Lady, Your Body is a Battleground, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Those are like my experiences with her. But for people who are less like into art history, Barbara Kruger is probably most known for being like the graphic inspiration behind Supreme and similar brands, where it's this like blocky Futura font with the like neon red backgrounds. And I think that by virtue of the fact that she's only known for one thing, me included, I only know her for one thing. She is both overrated and underrated. I think you could speak more freely about her other work, but to me, I think that because people don't know her for anything else, I think that she's underrated, but because the thing that she's known for is everywhere, wildly overrated.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's underrated that people don't know who she is. I think it's overrated when so many other brands decide to copy her work and call it street art.
Which it wasn't intended to be.
she came through in the postmodern era and really at the rise of feminism. It's funny how so many other brands, like the one I'm referencing right now is the Supreme getting into a lawsuit with Married to the Mob. And she was just like, I don't even know why this is your problem because you didn't even make the things, you know, and that's why I think she's underrated. I think it's overrated when like so many other, like Glossier is definitely inspired from Barbara Cougar from just the way the styling and the font is, and Supreme is, and all that good stuff. And when other brands try to like just copy that, it's like, you know, you can be like cool and edgy in a different way. And especially like this is so like anti-feminism, the way that you're approaching these things, and anti like supportive of artists.
And for everybody who's interested, Barbara Cougar, the themes of her work are really focused around like identity, consumerism, like visions of self, and like, which is, it's so ironic that her work about consumerism is now the like huge consumer product. Okay, I know you have strong feelings about this one. Coffee, overrated or underrated?
Oh, I feel like it's underrated. I feel so sad saying it because I'm like a victim to coffee. Dream-wise, I do want to say it's overrated, but I don't want to overrate myself. So that's why I'm saying it's underrated, because I drink coffee daily.
I do not. I drink coffee. Coffee is a tool for me. Coffee is used for last resort energy. So coffee to me is wildly overrated. I think most like socially acceptable stimulants or depressants are overrated. I'm not much for weed or alcohol either. I'm pretty like sober on all counts in terms of perception altering like substances, which I would consider coffee a part of. We have all collectively accepted that it is okay to be addicted to this one substance, and I think that is crazy to me.
And no one kind of bats an eye about it. But I was like, yeah, it's so underrated because I'm a victim to it. But also, like coffee kind of sets my mood for the day, where I'm like, oh, if it's going to be a chill day, I will start the day off with an iced coffee. But if it's going to be like an aggressively active day, I'm like, hot coffee. I have to start with hot coffee.
That is not to say that if you are a person who enjoys a good coffee, that is like different to me. Like so coffee as an addiction is overrated.
You're okay with the coffee snobs, but not the basic coffee girls.
I'm okay that if it's like your thing, right? Like if you really like coffee and like you enjoy it and you like seek out good coffee and you like make it a process and you love it, like I'm not knocking that. I'm knocking everybody else.
You know what this kind of supports, like the characteristic that I know of you, is that it's a thing. It just has to be a thing.
I'm very much a believer in like a deliberate. You need to, if you are doing something, it needs to be
a thing,
like deliberate. If you like clothes, you have to understand clothes. If you like coffee, you have to understand coffee. And I guess it sounds like gatekeepy, like gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss, but it just seems like if you're going to spend that much effort, time, finance doing something, you might as well like know it.
Okay. Or before we even ask this one, I'm like, are you the type of person where if you start a book, you have to finish that book?
I like, it eats at me. I usually don't because I'm human. I said this to my friend yesterday while I was hanging out. I'm giving myself the grace to accept the fact that I do not like to read. And I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not going to beat myself up and think that I'm a lesser human being because I don't like to read. I like to listen. I like to watch. But I do not like to read, and that's okay. This is a support group for me now. When it comes to stuff like music, video games, I have the desire to finish things. I don't like to just like do things halfway, but I think the nature of gaming is that like most people just have a backlog. I think mine is smaller than most, so I appreciate that about myself, and usually I'll come back to things after like 2 or 3 years. But
I think I'm the same with you and books. I just have like multiple books that I've started. I haven't finished it, but I like remember, where I last left off on them. But I was like, yeah, I guess like while we're being a little basic about coffee, Calvin, how do you feel about Helvetica?
It's only basic because we lived through that era where everybody was obsessed with Helvetica. There was something happened between 2011 to 2016 where it was just every designer's personality was Helvetica. And now it's not anymore. So we can say that it's underrated. But if you had asked us this question 5 years ago, it would have been wildly overrated.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And I'm glad that you got the years right too. I was about to say like maybe like 2010, but I realized I didn't graduate high school yet. But I was like, oh yeah, I remember a good phase on like Helvetica everywhere. And especially like tightly kerned Helvetica was definitely a thing too if you're pushing it. I think the new basic bitch is Times New Roman. Like bold.
Is it Times New Roman or is it Baskerville?
Both of them
Baskerville,
actually.
Garamond?
Yeah, I think that set is definitely very basic bitch now, which I try to avoid. But we did have one project that requested Bodoni, which, you know, I'm not.
Bodoni's nice.
Bodoni is nice. Yeah. Oh, Bodoni used to be like very overrated too, where it was like if you were going to be minimalistic, you were going down Helvetica. And if you wanted to be like editorial, you were going to use Bodoni.
Here's what I think. I think that Helvetica is vanilla ice cream.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it.
No matter what, vanilla will always be a good flavor. And maybe like Helvetica New.
Yeah, Helvetica New, yeah.
Noya is vanilla bean. Like
yeah.
A little
yeah,
bit better.
yeah. Oh my God, this was so amazing. This is really great, actually. That's the best way to compare it, yeah.
You'll come back to vanilla. Vanilla has its place on like, you know, on pie, on the things.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be for everybody and it's not gonna be on everything, but it is you need to respect the hustle of vanilla ice cream. Yeah. This last one is going to be very near and dear to both of us. So freelancing. Do you think freelancing is underrated or overrated?
I think freelancing is underrated because I think it gets written off as like they didn't get hired.
They couldn't kick it.
Yeah, they couldn't really get into like the real world. So they're like trying to make a new world type of thing. And like they don't know what they're doing. Like there's this weird, I guess, like laziness association with freelancing, where it's like you are irresponsible, you get to like make your own schedule. Like there's definitely this weird glamorized thing that like makes it feel like not a real job, you know? And I think like freelancing is insanely hard. And even like as we do it, as we continue to do it, it's still insanely hard. It's such like an upward battle that when you feel like you finally figured it out, like a whole new game changes. And especially with different markets changing and different things changing, it's so underrated by like how tough and how like strategic and rigorous it is.
I think everything that you said is true, but I also feel like there is this big group of people that really, really glamorize freelancing. It might just be maybe if you're at a like more senior level, it's like, oh, freelancing is for people who couldn't cut it. But for like that lower group and for the students, I think there is this like big culture around like, that sounds awesome. You know, and especially because there is this community of design influencers that make it look awesome too, where it's like, oh yeah, like own schedule, so much creativity, all these projects, I get to work with cool people. It paints this picture that freelancing is like the best lifestyle for like a young designer. And I think that that's overrated.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because like you said, because it is hard and because it's not for everybody too. Like having to find your meal is not for everybody.
My eyes got really big because that's literally how I think about it sometimes, when I'm like, we're finding our meal this month, like what are we eating this month? You know, so that's definitely a thing. I think freelancing is a lot easier if you've been in a professional setting, because you need to understand what the systems are to be able to navigate it. If you don't know what the systems are, like I'm not saying you have to follow the systems, I'm saying you just need to know what they are, what the processes are, because there's a reason why those systems are in place, is because it's working for certain companies and certain people to maintain the position that they have.
In the limited design like schooling that I've had, one thing that I had learned was like you need to understand what the rules are before you break them, because if you break the rules without knowing what they are, it just looks like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But if you know what you're doing and you're like deliberate about, you know, subverting the expectation or creating something that like accomplishes the same goals but in a different way, like that is what good design is. And that's the same thing with freelancing. Like you need to know what the system is like so that you can be a better freelancer and a better designer, as opposed to like
this carefree lifestyle.
Being unprofessional.
Yeah. Like I think the biggest one, especially if you're going to go into freelancing, go into an agency that kind of has the clients you want to work with, or it has like the intense professionalism you need to understand. And that could even be, instead of applying for a designer, it could definitely be like applying for a production artist role or applying for a studio manager role. Because your goal isn't to move up in the company. Your goal is to understand how the company functions. I was like, are those all our hot takes, Calvin? Or do you have thoughts about freelancing?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Really appreciate you listening to our podcast.
This was definitely I think it was a very fun, casual one instead of like a super serious topic all the time.
If you want to catch, though, our super serious topics, you can find those on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. We also post a newsletter every time we release a new episode and highlight artists that we know through the newsletter. So for these couple of months, it's going to be Angela Wynn or at Lemon Pup. Is it lemon.pup?
It's lemon.pup. Like pup as in puppy. And Angela also makes these like really beautiful, wonderful, like these little keycaps.
Yeah, for mechanical keyboards. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, just go on our website, studiodbj.com, scroll a little bit, and you'll get an opt-in for the newsletter. But yeah, otherwise, thank you for stopping by and listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next month.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.